Avengers! Assemble.
Hello everyone and welcome to a special episode of Excelsior, the world's #1 Marvel's Avengers podcast. I'm your director, Christian Buckley, joined as always by the Apex legend, Jack Martin.
Excelsior, Christian. Good to be back in the post Marvel's Avengers Excelsior landscape.
Oh hell yeah. And I mean, we're recording this...
Or pre rather.
Yes. We're recording this Tuesday. We both saw Shang-Chi this past weekend. This is going to be our review of it. We will have a normal episode of Excelsior up later this week. The normal Saturday episode, going over the roadmap, whatever else happens with Avengers this week. But now, it is the focus on Shang-Chi. So, if you haven't seen it, we'll do spoiler-free stuff for the first few minutes. Spoiler-filled after that, but... Jack, overall, first, how you doing? How's the theater experience? How is it going to see another Marvel movie?
It was excellent. Like I said in our previous Excelsior episode, I was excited to see Black Widow more so for the theatrical experience rather than the movie itself. And quickly into that movie, I was like, you know what, this is kind of faded and not loving the movie as much as I wanted to, but in terms of the actual theater experience, I think I was in probably the exact same theater we were in, like the same like auditorium in the theater that I went to over this weekend. Had the nice cushy chairs with the reclining seats. That's always nice. And yeah, in terms of that, it was a really good theater experience, and it was really good to be back in the theater because this is the second movie I've seen this year. So yeah, they killed it in that regard. What about you?
Yeah, I had a good time. I went Saturday morning. I went to a theater near me. It opened very early, and I got in at the 12:15 showing. So I think that's the earliest I've been to a movie theater in a long time. But honestly, I think that might be my strategy for other stuff that's coming out this fall that I want to see because... I mean, I was going in expecting there to be literally nobody else in the theater, but to my surprise, the first showing of the day, the theater I was in probably had another 15 people. So, it surprised me. The power of Marvel,
What was the age demographic, and were you the youngest person in that theater?
Oh, no. I saw people around my age or older, I think.
Whoa, maybe they employed the same tactic that you did.
Yeah, I'm thinking they did. I'm thinking they might have. Because I didn't see, like, any elderly people who were showing up, right? Maybe I did, and it was just dark out. But I saw a couple kids. I saw some parents. I saw people who probably look like they're in their 20s. So, yeah.
Nice.
Well, why don't we get into general thoughts on Shang-Chi, the latest installment in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Been a minute since we've done a dedicated episode for a MCU review, but it feels good.
Yeah, I know. It's been a bit.
So, overall, Jack, general thoughts, spoiler-free, what did you think of Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings?
Dude, I loved this movie, and I was very surprised how much I really enjoyed it. I was going in with the expectation that this was going to be like a really good martial arts movie, but not be too much beyond that, but kind of blew me away. I think the bare minimum for me with this movie was it had to have good action, and it far surpassed my expectations. I think that's one of the best parts of this movie, and every time there's an action scene, it's just as good, if not better, than the last one. And every time I'm like, oh man, what are they going to do next? And they employ different tactics and strategies as throughout the fight, and there are just so many different like unique scenes every time they enter an action set piece. So I was blown away by it each and every time, and I was at the edge of my seat for sure when I was watching that. And overall, just a really good story. I feel like this is a good setup for a character I'm excited to see go forward. And I really like Shang-Chi as a character himself and the other cast of characters. Be it the villain, who I thought was an interesting villain and one of the upper villains in the MCU, I'd say, to his friends and family. Yeah, it was a really good time all around, and I quite enjoyed myself. What about you?
Yeah, so I went in to this movie with it being my most anticipated Marvel project of this year that wasn't Spider-Man, right? And I think it surpassed my expectations because I went in similar to you, just expecting it to feel different from other stuff in the MCU, feel fresh, but I was not expecting it to kind of slap me in the face and be like, hey, moving forward, and even in hindsight, this movie is going to be a bar that I judge the rest of the MCU against, because I was genuinely blown away with how effective it was at introducing all this new lore, these new characters, and centering it on the legacy of this family, like very strong interpersonal character drama in the forefront of this one. And on top of all of that, like you said, the action was fantastic. And it was like so refreshing to see MCU tackle action in a way that didn't feel like it was just there. I guess like it felt like all the action here, every fight had a purpose to it. And the way it was shot as well, just very different, I feel like, from a lot of the standard MCU action. Like some longer takes, just really feeling the impact of those punches and hits. And I had a blast with the whole thing. And I left the theater very high on it. It has risen even higher than it was in my initial post-theater ranking. And it is hard for me to think of many negatives about this one.
Yeah, I certainly have my negatives, but the positives of this movie like far surpass those. Like every MCU movie I think I have some gripes with, and I certainly do for this movie, but for the most part, I really enjoyed this movie. And we'll get to rankings later, but it certainly sits higher than I was expecting it to, and that makes me happy. And like, this is one of those things where I came out of the movie really enjoying it, and I listened to other like reviews and stuff of people who enjoyed it, and it just made me want to see it again.
Same.
And that I think is a really good sign. It gave me, for me, this is like a very me thing, but it gave me like similar feelings to how I felt about The Force Awakens when I saw it. I liked it. I had some issues with it being like A New Hope kind of a reboot in a way, and then I saw it again and I was like, wow, this is amazing. And I'm kind of looking forward to seeing this one as quickly as I can again.
Yeah, so why don't we crack open the spoiler gate. Before we do that, general, should you see this? I guess yes, I would recommend seeing it as soon as you can, safely of course, but yeah, I think this is an absolute must-see for the MCU.
Yeah, to hammer that home, I would say, like what you were alluding to earlier, it's very different from other MCU movies in the best possible way, while also like still retaining the MCU feel to it. So yeah, I would 100% recommend seeing this one.
Yeah, and I don't know if there's updated numbers on this. I could have checked, but the opening weekend smashed some records. Pandemic, despite it, like there was, I think, a record specifically. It's the highest grossing Labor Day weekend opening of all time. I think the projections had it at an 80 million opening weekend. I don't know if this is the official number yet, but over the weekend that was the projection. And I think Shang-Chi made his presence known, and I think he will be front and center in the MCU moving forward, which makes me very happy.
Yeah, definitely. I did see numbers floating around at like 91 million. I think that might be for the like Labor Day weekend, so like the 4-day weekend.
Sure.
So yeah, I know. Oh yeah, so I have it here. Grosses 90 million domestically over the 4-day weekend. I forget I think it's sitting at like 140 million, including the international box office. So did very well. I'm very glad this movie kind of deserved to do well, in my opinion. I'm really glad it did. So that's great news.
Yeah, I think especially with the comments of, Bob Chapek being like, oh, it's an interesting experiment, and then everything like that, it deserved to do well. and it did do well, and we're all having a good old time. And I think one last stat before we actually get to the meat and potatoes of this. I saw somebody on Twitter saying like it held its Rotten Tomatoes score for a very long time. It was at 92 for a very long time on Rotten Tomatoes, even after the film came out and like more reviews flooded in. But I can double check what it is at right now, but 92 is quite high for the MCU.
Yeah, that's super high. So it's really well deserved. I think we get caught in the like hype cycle of things, so it's kind of hard to see like the actual reality until you actually get through it. But I feel like the hype kind of was consistent with the actual product we got in the end.
Yeah, it is still at 92 with how many reviews? Is at 92 with a grand total of 251 reviews. So bet that's going to hold. Now,
yeah, definitely.
Why don't we get into spoiler territory? Again, if you haven't seen it, you can come back, or if you don't care, listen away. Where would you like to start? Because I could be a bit more specific about the only thing that I really have a gripe with the film. If you want to start there.
Okay, yeah, we can start there.
I think because this movie was so, like, again, unlike the MCU in a way where I was genuinely invested with the drama and tension between these characters and the familial relationship and the stress and just that like toxic dad sort of thing that he had going on, but you kind of felt for the dad still. Like, it was so layered and genuinely dramatic that I think some of the jokes fell a little flat for me because I was just so invested in the actual character drama. So it was like the MCU quippiness, like, it worked for me in some places, but in some places I was like, oh, like, yeah, that was funny, but no, I'm really like invested right now. Like, that was really my main thing.
That is definitely an MCU. I don't even think that is an MCU specific thing anymore. It's kind of like just a blockbuster thing nowadays, where a super serious scene will be punctuated with a quip to like get the audience to laugh at it, and it's just kind of distracting a lot of times. So I totally see that. For me, the comedy that didn't hit was I wasn't the biggest fan of Awkwafina's comedy in this, and that's kind of her whole thing, like throughout anything she's in, really. I feel like she was a lot more dialed down than anything else I've seen her in. But wasn't the biggest fan of. I liked her character, but some of the jokes and stuff that she had wasn't necessarily my favorite. So that was a little distracting throughout the movie for me.
Yeah, I can hear that. Like, some of her jokes did hit for me, but some of the other ones, it was just like, I was like, oh, yeah, okay. Because we were riding off just this really dramatic reunion of Shang-Chi with his sister or his dad, and then, it's like, oh, wow, I'm really curious to see how these characters are going to play off each other. Then we get hit with the joke. It's like, okay, that's not what I want to see. I want to see more of this tension. And we get there, but a couple roadblocks in the way. But
yeah, and that's kind of consistent for any comedic relief character in any MCU movie. Like, I love Luis in Ant-Man and Ant-Man the Wasp, and I think a lot of people love him because of his like recaps. Like, that's kind of the main draw for him. But then there's a lot of jokes that he says that just aren't necessarily funny. So I would say Katie doesn't necessarily have the like the recap situations that Luis has, but so like there's not anything that's drawing to her comedic style. So there's that for her. I did like the Hotel California payoff. I thought that was
funny. That
was pretty good. That was an example. I was like, all right, sweet. That was a great joke.
Yeah, and like some of the other stuff she did, like the Kamehameha joke, I thought was funny, and like there were some other things she did that I was laughing at her. But I think the only reason that, and again, this is a very minor hang up I have with the film, but I think the only reason it stood out to me and is my main thing that I didn't love is just because, like I said, where Ant-Man, it's like, oh yeah, I hope Scott gets to see his kid and stuff. I just felt the entire movie here did carry a weight with it. And I think that might be because of Tony Leung, but like really it did have a level of drama to it that I feel like a lot of the other stuff in the MCU doesn't have for me.
Yeah, totally.
So more pronounced there. Um, if I had to guess one of your issues with it, is it the third act CG stuff?
No, it's not.
Really?
Yeah, dude. That's the thing. That was like my main takeaway with this movie, and I'm glad you brought this up. The third act is my favorite part of this
Hell
movie,
yeah, dude.
which is such a surprise for me and just I feel like for the MCU in general because I would say 85 to 90% of MCU projects' third acts are the worst parts of those movies. Like, obviously, there are exceptions. Avengers Endgame, the list goes on for a few projects. But usually, like Falcon and the Winter Soldier, for example, the third act is just not good and very distracting.
Yeah,
and just kind of a means to an end.
I'll say also, in the cases that you're bringing up of the exceptions to the third act, I think in those cases, like Endgame, and like a handful of others too, like Infinity War kind of, well, maybe not Infinity War. Infinity War is more in line with Shang-Chi, what I'm about to say. In the case of like Endgame or something like Endgame, the third act to me is like that movie. Like it's the reason I'm there for it. I'm just like Avengers 1 also. I'm waiting for the third act. But Shang-Chi, what I really loved about it is that it constantly is just building and it's still like it doesn't falter anywhere, I think, on the road to that third act. So it's not like I think that the third act outshines the rest of the movie because the rest of the movie does take its time building up the payoffs for that third act, which I will compare, like I said, to Infinity War. Like Infinity War, I think, is also a constant build. And here, I don't really have any moments that I feel like didn't or were like a disservice or taking away from that road to the end of the film.
Right. And even if there are moments that drag or are just kind of serviceable, like the two factions just kind of fighting, which is, whatever. There are moments like afterwards that are constantly building on that to make that a better sequence. Like the 10 rings being used as a weapon, I adored. I was very worried about that in trailers where I was like, oh, this kind of looks hokey and I don't know, the CG is kind of a little off, but they use it as like such like tangible objects in the universe, and they use them in like different ways. It's not just I'll use this like as a whip. It's I can shoot this as a bullet essentially and call it back as like a boomerang, or I can lift off into the sky and halt my momentum as I'm coming back down. Like it's so amazing, and I thought that was handled incredibly well, and the fight between him and his father was great.
I loved the impact of them too, and just
oh yeah,
like
they felt so real.
Like you're saying, the versatility of it. Like he's got the ring barrier. It looked like the Hades Athena shield, right? Like there's so many cool uses for these objects, and we can get to that later of their role moving forward. But yeah, I'm with you. I really loved how they implemented the 10 rings.
My favorite part of this movie, and I didn't really see this coming. Maybe I'm dumb. Maybe I didn't watch enough trailers. I just saw the stinger of the dragon in the water was the dragon. And there are so many points in this movie, mostly during the action sequences. I'm like, all right, let's go. And once we got to the dragon, I was like, are you kidding me? Like I feel like we haven't seen that depiction of I feel like the traditional Chinese dragon in like big blockbuster movies. So seeing that like soar out of the water and just use different tactics to kill all the enemies in that area was just incredible. And to see a giant fight between that and I guess I'm forgetting the name of the giant whatever monster
The demon
at the end
bat
of this
dragon,
movie. Yeah, and a thing with that, like obviously that reminds me of the Thor Ragnarok and baddie voiced by forgetting his name. Whatever. That's serviceable because you have Wen Wu as like a completely complex villain, and that just sort of leads up to for me at least, the no-name giant demon in the sky that is just kind of vanquished at the end of that movie. But I feel like that's earned because you do have a good villain that in turn leads to this giant creature being released. So that whole sequence I absolutely loved. And I was completely surprised that the third act of this movie was as good as it was and is probably my favorite part of the movie.
Yeah, and dude, I honestly I think it is because the movie handles characters in a way that I feel like a lot of the MCU just doesn't. Like I think the closest comparison I can make is, and I know you feel differently about Guardians too, but the Guardians movies, like the reason those films work so well, I think, is because it's so focused on the characters, their interactions with each other, and their relationships with each other, more than the what's actually going on with the story or the plot. And because we spend this entire movie seeing Shang-Chi having to face his past, deal with his legacy, who he's meant to be, seeing Wen Wu like very fleshed out with a lot of nuance, and then Xiaoling also just sort of coming to terms with accepting her brother back into her life, like all that stuff I think allows for the third act to have such this like a strong payoff, despite the fact that there's these CG monsters fighting each other. And I'm with you, like when the dragon showed up and everything, like the score was hitting, I was feeling emotional, especially when like it went to grab Xiaoling also, and then he got to unite with her, and then they were both able to work together. Like just all of the payoffs it had emotionally, I thought just elevated what we were seeing on screen. And what we were seeing on screen did look really cool. It was cool to see a Chinese dragon fighting a demon monster, you know?
Yeah, I saw some and listened to some reviews, and I don't think people harped on it like too much, but I did hear a lot of people complain about the CG in the third part of the movie. I really didn't think it was all that noticeable in a bad way. The only instance I saw was maybe like there was a conversation between Katie and Shang-Chi, and the depth of field was like super heavy, and it like it's like okay, it's probably a green screen behind them, but that was it. That was all I really noticed. I thought all the creature designs were excellent. I thought they looked good. It didn't look, for example, like the rhinos in Black Panther, which was like, oh, that's just a fake thing in a real field. Everything looked like it belonged, including the human characters. So, yeah, I mean, I really don't have any complaints with the visuals of that sequence.
Honestly, I was thinking this during the movie, and I thought about it a lot after, and I want you to tell me if I'm off base, but I think this movie reminds me a lot of the reasons I love Star Wars.
Okay.
Mainly in that there is that familial focus to everything that's happening in the movie, and when everything gets bombastic, it is still rooted in that conflict within the family at the end, because there is a tension between Xiaoling and Shang-Chi, and I would have liked to see a little more of a fight between him and Wen Wu at the end, but I did like his turn at the end to sacrifice himself so he could save everyone and, honor his mother and stuff like that. But I was just, the whole time I was thinking of a lot of just Star Wars for some reason.
With the familial logic, does this movie also make you think of the Fast and the Furious franchise?
No.
I didn't think so.
Yeah. But
that's an interesting take. I can totally see what you're saying.
Yeah. So great when anything reminds me of Star Wars, I can tell you that right now.
Yeah, totally.
Do you want to talk a little more about Wen Wu as a character?
Yeah, sure.
Sure. So Tony Leung, I think this is his first like major Hollywood film. I know he is very, very big with stuff like In the Mood for Love. I watched in college and I loved it, and he was in that. That's a Wong Kar-wai film. He was also in why am I blanking on it? The Departed, the actual original version.
Ooh, I don't know.
Oh, come on. I'm blanking on it, but the thing that Scorsese built The Departed on,
Mm-hmm.
the original Chinese version of it, he was in that. He was Leo's character. Um, and he's been in a bunch of other stuff, like I think Hard Boiled he was also in. But
Is
yeah.
Eternal Affairs the movie you're thinking of?
Yes, it is. Thank you.
Okay, that was his second movie on IMDb, and I was like, you know what? That might be it.
Yeah, that was it. But yeah, he's been a huge star his entire life, just never in Western markets. But I thought he killed it. Like you said, I think he's one of Marvel's best villains so far. Like, in a way that I look at him differently than I look at like Thanos or Killmonger. Even though I think those are still great Marvel villains, like I look at Wen Wu, I'm like, you're really great also, but in so many different ways.
I did really like his character. I think he is one of the more complex villains, because the villains that people usually like are villains that you kind of understand and like can kind of see like, oh, I kind of get what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
And that's Wen Wu for sure. At the beginning of the movie, he's a conqueror, and then he settles down, has a family, and then loses his wife, and then is put on this path that we find him now. So I really like that portrayal. I wish it went a little bit further, and I guess I can't necessarily pinpoint it. I wish he was a little bit more. What's the word I'm looking for? Like, he got Shang-Chi and his sister to kind of believe him more, like a little bit more.
Sure, okay.
Went a little bit more and kind of made them second guess what they were doing. And I wish we sort of saw or heard from his wife, aside from just in the third act, like maybe throughout the movie, like we kind of got in his head a little bit more to understand him a bit. So I feel like his portrayal was a little bit like more on paper and like through the dialogue we could understand, but maybe if there was a few scenes where we could sort of understand where he was at, like him alone in a room sort of listening to his wife's voice or something like that, I think that would have gone a long way to make him a little bit more believable as a villain. But still, at the end of the day, I thought he was great.
Sure. So you're talking like before there's like the scene of him in the office when the razor hand guy is like, "Sir, you all right?" And he's like looking at the couch and he sees his wife, like before that part. Yeah, okay.
I feel like a few more, like one or two more scenes to just sort of hammer that home.
Sure, yeah. All that in mind, though, I do think in terms of making an MCU villain just a high expectations, harsh father figure is, again, just kind of refreshing. Because if we look at, again, like you said, the highlights of Thanos or Vulture or Killmonger or Zemo, like they all have just like methodical things about them. Like Thanos has his calculus, Zemo has his big plan. Killmonger, I think, also has a plan that you can get behind, or at least the idea and thesis of it. Same with Vulture. But I do like that a lot of the villainous stuff we see Wen Wu do, like we're told and get to see his life as a conqueror, right? But that was so long ago. What he's actually doing in the film is just antagonistic towards his children, kind of, in a way that, yes, he is going to burn down the village in the end, but the moment-to-moment stuff on the way is just him basically outcasting them and not listening to them. So again, just working on that nuance and new, fresh feeling for a Marvel villain. I was a big fan of him. I'm sad he's dead, but
right,
he was great.
Yeah, his motives are all good. Like at the end of the day, he wanted to reunite with his wife and his children. He just went about it in like the worst way possible. But yeah, I did like him as the villain he was. He was complex, but you kind of understood where he was at. So I thought he's definitely up there for sure.
Yeah. If you will allow it, I will continue my trend of referencing Destiny on this podcast.
Yeah, let's hear it.
I saw Paul Tassi do a write-up of this, and I did not realize it until I saw his tweet about it. But the plot of Wen Wu in Shang-Chi is essentially a story arc that happens in the Destiny 2 expansion Forsaken, where there's an antagonist who gets a little whisper in his ear that is a dead family member of him that is sort of pushing him and guiding him towards a direction where he will have to free this person from a place. Turns out it's actually this space worm demon god, and it's in a realm that is like hidden from the normal person as well.
Right.
So.
That's a good comparison. I really like how at the end of the day, Wen Wu was just sort of duped.
Yeah.
Like he didn't have this like grand plan. Like he wanted to just sort of, in his mind, he wanted to do the right thing. He ended up just being tricked, which is it's very tragic for him as a character. Which is I think why I like this portrayal.
Yeah, because I was also like before we got a sense of the fact that he was, being manipulated. I was like kind of rooting for him of like, oh yeah, like it would be really great if the point of this movie is to reunite this family, and it's gonna be feel good. They're gonna work together. Maybe somebody dies along the way. Like maybe that's where we're going with this. And then once he got a little more unhinged, I was like, okay, what I understand now, but maybe I was foolish. I did enjoy what we got, though. I think it was very fresh, and I see people saying that word constantly with this movie, and I cannot help but agree.
Yeah, I feel like it kind of applies to a lot of things for Shang-Chi.
Yeah. Moving on from Wen Wu, do you just want to talk about the action in general? Like favorite action set pieces? Like, as I got a list.
Yeah, for me, there's... I don't know. I would say the ones that come to mind, aside from the third act in general, was obviously the bus scene.
Yeah, it was great.
And the building scene where they're essentially on like a jungle gym outside of a building. Both of those scenes just feel so like on the ground. Like it just feels so realistic in a way where we're seeing these long takes and like close-up shots of the actors actually performing this. It just felt so real and so there, unlike a lot of the action in the MCU, even like the big airport battle scene in Civil War. It's not the action itself that's cool. It's kind of the jokes and quips in between. And the action is just sort of the driving plot. But with this, the action is what's exciting about what's happening. And yeah, man, I was just really stunned by how crazy good the action was in this.
I did not think it could happen, but they made a knife fight that is better than the knife fight in The Winter Soldier. Am I out of pocket for saying that?
I wouldn't think so. You're talking about the fight on the building with, is it Deathbringer, the character?
Yeah. The masked person who's working for Wen Wu after the club gets invaded, and they go down to that sort of open scaffolding, like the cement everywhere, and you can see like the neon billboards in the background, and then it's just him versus the knife. Like,
yeah,
that was like the Winter Soldier one is great because it has like the high caliber stuff, like the flippy knife and everything like that, the hits and the stops. Like this though, like this was that, but it didn't stop and it looked way better. Like I was a big fan of that fight specifically, and like you said, obviously the bus was fantastic, but the one that stands out to me for sure is that knife fight. That was electric.
Yeah, I think you have a good point. And Death Dealer is the character I mentioned. I just looked it up. But yeah, like transitioning from them essentially like swinging around on the scaffolding and also like using the equipment on there as weapons and like ways to defeat the enemies that are after them. Amazing. And then yeah, it leads right into the knife fight, which yeah, I think you're probably right. That was because like you're actually watching these two actors go at it. And like I remember there were scenes from the trailer where people were like, man, this knife sequence looks really cool, and they were like, oh yeah, he actually did that as an actor. So just the way they filmed all the action and them actually doing most, if not all, of the fighting in this was just incredible, and it shows on screen.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, like you said, it shows there. It shows on the bus sequence. I saw over the weekend, Simu Liu posted a video of him on a blue screen set doing like the bus thing where he did the slide on the roof of the bus, then grabbed the mirror and then hit the door. Like, it was just very impressive seeing him actually doing all that stuff for the role. So I think that absolutely lended to the impact and allowed for the long takes. Like, I know Tom Cruise is that obsessed with the stunts with Mission Impossible, where he's like, it has to be me or they won't believe it. So it was cool seeing him dedicate that side of the role as well.
Definitely. I feel like that's probably my favorite part of this movie. It's like how this has probably the best action in any MCU movie, and like it really like proves in what you say.
Definitely. I'll say this also. Now, I was really happy with how much Chinese they actually used in the movie.
Yeah, that's what one of my friends was saying. She's Chinese and Greek, and she, like, in the car ride back from the movie, which also great to have a nice, car ride back with the discussion after a movie. That's always great.
Always.
And she speaks fluent Mandarin, and she was like, yeah, they correctly used the language, and they spoke it like a lot throughout the movie, which was I thought was great.
Yeah, and I took, God, how many years did I take? I think I took 7 years of Mandarin, and I did not retain that much of it, right? But like, it was very cool picking up on some of the phrases and the shorthands and all that stuff. Like, it was really cool, and I'm glad that they dedicated themselves to using that much of it, because even, God, I can't even think of like other MCU movies that have like, we use Russian sometimes, I think.
Yeah, Russian a lot, I feel.
But this was like, I wouldn't be surprised if like at least 15 to 20 minutes of this movie is just Mandarin.
Yeah, I could see that. For the like prologue and the opening.
Yeah, dude, I loved that they did the whole thing like that.
Right.
That was so great.
Yeah, that was good.
How does it feel that Shang-Chi is a year older than us?
Is that true?
I think that was 96. It was the title card, so I think that's when he was born.
Oh, I thought you were talking about Simu Liu.
Oh, no.
It's like, I feel
The
awful
character.
about myself. Well, yeah, I mean, I feel less bad about myself because he was just a valet when he was living in San Francisco. Obviously, he had all these crazy talents, but still, he was just being a valet. So I feel less bad about myself.
Yeah. But yeah, just everything they did for that culture and working it into the MCU, like, you could feel it for sure. And I'm glad they dedicated themselves to it on that level. But
yeah, absolutely.
What do you think about the soundtrack?
Yeah, that's another thing I really liked about this movie. I'm trying to remember the instrument that it like comes here and back again throughout the movie. It's like a stringed instrument. I'm trying to look it up. It's like my friend was telling me it's like a 2-stringed instrument, but that would come out. The Eru, ERHU. That's in a few different TV shows or movies that I've seen that I absolutely love, and that's featured pretty prominently throughout the soundtrack of this. It's like a very emotionally driven instrument, which I love, and yeah, that, and just I feel like that comes up at a lot of points throughout this movie, specifically when he is defeating the giant monster at the end of this movie. I thought that was great, but yeah, I really liked the soundtrack, and I really wasn't expecting to, or that wasn't something that was on my mind going into this movie. So I thought it was great.
Yeah, I thought the score was fantastic. Shang-Chi's theme hits when it goes in, and the the licensed soundtrack too, I thought was very good. Like, it was a lot of songs that were written for the film, I'm pretty sure, but yeah, like I've had the rotation on Spotify for a little bit, just listening to the songs from the film, because it had a really good vibe to it. Like especially the beginning of the movie when it was introducing him in San Francisco. Like a lot of the music they used, I was really feeling. And I saw also there's a song, I forget what it's called, but it has like four different artists attached to it. 21 Savage is one of them, and then a good amount of the song he's in Chinese.
Oh wow.
So some cool stuff they did for the soundtrack,
Yeah,
I think.
in terms of the like soundtrack itself, I loved the Anderson .Paak song at the end of the movie.
Mm-hmm.
I love the trend of having like big performers do the end credits song for MCU movies. I feel like there's a few movies that have done it, and it's been great. Like Kendrick Lamar and SZA did All the Stars for Black Panther, which I adored. And I really liked this song. I'm going to have to look it up later and listen to it more. But straight out of the film, I was like, oh man, I'm loving the vibe of this song. Like after we see them go off to meet up with Wong, like I thought that was awesome.
Yeah, that was fantastic. I mean, you brought up Wong. Let's talk about the fight scene in the arena that we were all waiting anxiously to see. I'm a little confused. Is Wong training Abomination? Is that what's going on?
I don't know. I've seen people say maybe he's getting Abomination out to just maybe train him a little bit. I thought they were. He mentioned like pulling punches. I thought maybe they were like scamming people and being like, all right, this time you're gonna win and we're gonna bet on you and we're gonna win money or whatever.
Is that
I don't
Wong's
know.
income?
That's what I was thinking. Like that was my rationale because last time we saw him in Endgame, he only had $1.50. So
Yeah.
I was thinking maybe they were, I mean, they're doing this in the black market. I don't see why like anyone would approve of this. Like Ross has to be in charge of Abomination. So maybe Wong is just like slipping past security and being like, all right, we're going to this fight club. We're going to make some bets here. We're going to make it look good. That was my thought.
Well, yeah, because once they left in the movie, right? Like they left through a portal, and he was like, Abomination was like following them through the portal, and in the background, it looked like there was like, maybe you're onto something. Like it looked like a high security place, like maybe like a bank or maybe the Raft or something weird. Like I saw
thought it looked
red
like
lights,
a cell or something. Yeah.
and bars. So maybe, yeah, you might be onto something.
I think they're scheming money.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And then, what did you think of seeing good old Trevor again?
Yeah, I was just about to bring up Trevor Slattery. I think that got a little spoiled for me because I knew he went to the premiere, Ben
Same.
Kingsley. So that's fine. I thought they used him sparingly enough because he's very much a character and he's very ridiculous. But I did enjoy his brand of comedy in this, how he's just kind of like just lost his marbles at this point. The fact that he's like, oh, you could see this little guy too. I thought that was good stuff. And yeah, I feel like they don't overuse him, which is always the worry with characters like that. I feel like he is in the Korg camp where if he was in the movie way too much, then that would be a complaint. But I feel like he was in it just enough and had just enough funny line deliveries and sequences with the Planet of the Apes like explanation, and everyone's like, all right. And yeah, no, and him showing up on the ground, be like, nah, this is just an act, bro. Like, get with it. I thought he was used very well for this movie.
Yeah, I'm glad they got Ben Kingsley back because I thought it was very fun, and I'm sure he had fun doing this because, like you said, he just went off. Because in Iron Man 3, I do think Trevor is a ridiculous character in Iron Man 3, but here it's definitely cranked up because there's mystic arts involved at this point and spiritual sides of things and dimensions he doesn't know exists, and then he thinks he's losing his mind for how many years, right? Like, yeah, I think he was used well. I agree. Does this change your feelings about Iron Man 3 at all?
Oh yeah, I had a whole reconciliation when I rewatched it for Excelsior season 1. So I like Iron Man 3. I think it's my favorite Iron Man 3 or my favorite Iron Man movie.
Hell yeah, you do.
Yeah. Yeah, I've thought that since we reviewed these movies, and that's kind of stayed consistent. I'm less bothered by the reveal because I guess I didn't really care about the Mandarin as a comic book character. I thought it was funny that this is kind of like a make good for that, where they're like, oh yeah, we kind of like use this mythology and into our movie, and now they're kind of making fun of that character in this movie. So I thought that was pretty good. And there's so many sequences where I'm like, man, Academy Award winning Ben Kingsley is lying on the ground with this little creature. Like, what is going on? I thought that was great.
That man played Gandhi.
I know.
I was gonna say, I think it also makes Iron Man 3. I mean, like, we kind of assumed this because of, like, I think in Iron Man 3 there's a line where, like, he got facial reconstruction surgery, right? And people were like, oh, well, he had to get it to look like someone, right? Like, but I think that might have been a theory. But I think hearing and seeing all of this with the Mandarin in this film makes Iron Man 3, specifically Killian, even fit better into that role, because a white dude named Aldrich appropriated a Chinese legend to make his terror thing work. Like, I think that just adds to the skeeziness of Aldrich Killian in a good way,
Yeah, right. It probably makes Iron Man 3 age better because of that, with the hindsight of knowing what he did and the explanation from Wen Wu.
Yeah. I guess it also changes some stuff about Iron Man 1, right?
Yeah, with the Ten Rings as an organization. Yeah.
So they were operating under Wen Wu, technically.
Right.
Cool. That's neat.
Yeah.
Is there anything we haven't hit yet besides, like, Shang-Chi himself that you want to talk about before we move on to him?
I'm kind of like, I know we get to like the end credit scene of the Ten Rings, and I guess we were just talking about the Ten Rings as an organization. I'm not super like sold personally on the idea of like following up with them as a group. Like, I guess it'll be interesting to see how his sister sort of takes over and leads that group into a new era. But yeah, it's kind of like how Black Widow is like, all right, now we have the Black Widows as a group. I'm like, I don't really care all that much. Obviously, I'll wait and see. But at this point, I'm like, yeah, that wasn't the biggest reveal because it was kind of obvious. And then as a group, I'm like, I guess it'll be nice to like spend more time with them and learn more about them. But I'm not super stoked for that right now.
Sure. Did you see that there was a Black Widow in one of the
Yes.
cells in the club?
I did, yeah. Yep.
Yeah. I mean, I hear what you're saying about the Ten Rings. I think they could have I think it's a good question to leave off with as a final thing, because you don't really know what direction they're going to take with it. Like, if she's going to use them for a criminal empire, or if it's going to be just this force that is sort of operating on their own morals or something. Like, I have a lot of questions about the future of the Ten Rings. I think whenever we get an Endgame style big battlefield thing again, she will show up with them and it'll be a hype moment. But yeah, I can hear what you're saying with that.
Yeah, like, it seems interesting. I'm kind of thinking they might be like a morally gray group at this point, like almost Robin Hood-y in a sense.
Sure.
But yeah, I guess we'll have to wait and see. But yeah, at the end of the movie, I was like, okay, you can sell me, but right now I'm not sold.
Yeah, and I'll say this too: Xiaoling as a character, I really loved her arc, and just seeing her sort of have that scorned approach to Shang-Chi when he first shows up, and then bond with him a little bit, and then their family dragon at the end, uniting them and sort of elevating both of them to take on both sides of their parents' legacy. I thought that was handled very, very well, and I'm excited to see more from her in the future too.
Yeah, I really liked her growth as a character, from not being able to train with all of them, or like training separately, and then feeling like scorned from Shang-Chi, or by Shang-Chi, which makes sense. in seeing where she ends up. Yeah, I liked her trajectory as a character, and I'm more interested to follow up with her than I am as the organization itself. But I guess that will probably be the main draw for whatever project that ends up being. Seems like a Disney Plus sort of thing.
Yeah, and there was a ton of stuff that was coming out over the weekend, right? Of just little stories about everything that went into the development of the film, and I saw the actress Mengar Zhang. She met her fiance on set,
Oh
I
right,
think,
yeah,
or her husband. I think they might be married now because this film was in production in like 2019, which is wild.
I know it's insane.
Um, but yeah, very wholesome, you know.
Yeah, it's very sweet.
So Shang-Chi himself, what do you think of him?
I really liked how sweet he seemed. Like he just seemed like, especially in the beginning of the movie, he just seemed like such a, at that point, like a relatable character. Like he's just a dude living in San Francisco, trying his best, being a valet, living in an apartment and just kind of living his life at that point as we know him. And he's someone I really am interested in following up on, because I feel like for like first movies for characters, we don't really get the best sense of how they are, and we haven't really obviously seen like a large arc. We've only seen the arc in the one movie, so he's someone I'm interested in seeing like progress throughout the movies. But yeah, I really liked him as a standalone character. I feel like he'll fit very nicely with the new Avengers we'll find in this phase. What about you?
Yeah, I loved him. I, like you, cannot wait to see more of him. I think he carries a great attitude with him that I feel like a lot of Marvel heroes don't have, and that there is that sort of wholesomeness behind him and very like sweet nature with everything. And I think a lot of that is what Simu Liu brings to the character, but seeing him go through that arc of like self-acceptance and uh, dealing with the family legacy through him, I think it was a good first arc, right? Because when we look at other first introduction hero films, like what we have, the Phase 1 stuff, Captain Marvel, Black Panther. Well, Black Panther was in Civil War, kind of, and same with Spider-Man. But Ant-Man, like, there's a handful of ones that I can name in addition to all those. But I feel like with them, it's a lot of very cool things that come alongside the character, where I think in Shang-Chi it is interesting because it puts the character and his, I guess, emotional familial struggle first, right? Like Ant-Man brings with it a very great surrounding cast and a lot of comedy and Paul Rudd humor. Captain Marvel, I think, struggled to introduce a character because she had amnesia for 2/3 of the film. But like even Thor 1, as much as I love it, struggles to introduce Thor, right? Like I think what they did with Shang-Chi and like having him be a focus of this family's lineage was really a good decision to sort of establish him as a character, accept his role as a face of the MCU, and leave us wanting a new adventure with him.
Totally. And kind of conversely to how we see people like Tony Stark and Thor, who are characters that need to go through character development and growth to just be better people. I feel like when we find Shang-Chi, like he obviously, like after everything he's been through, like he's kind of rehabilitating and like being a new person in the United States. Like he is just a sweet person that will just go out and like party with his friend, go do karaoke or whatever. He's like one of those characters, kind of like Spider-Man in a way, where it's just a very grounded, like relatable person. Obviously, like he has all this lineage and like kind of like emotional and mental abuse, and physical abuse, like growing up, like from his father and from the Ten Rings themselves. But where we find him, like he is just a normal dude living in San Francisco, at that point in the movie. And like even at the end, like he's still, even after all the events, he still goes and does karaoke. Like he's just, I feel like he's just someone you'd want to hang out with. And I feel like that's a good addition to the roster of characters we've seen in the MCU.
100%. And I'm glad you made the Spider-Man comparison, because towards the end of the movie, and like thinking about his future in the MCU, right? Like I was talking to Kayla because I saw it with her afterwards. Of like, I really want to see him just hang out with Spider-Man. The first chance we get, I want to see the two of them hang out. I feel like they'd have a great time together.
Yeah, that's a really good call. And like we have Tom Holland doing the lip sync battles. We have Shang-Chi doing karaoke.
Ooh.
Like match made in heaven.
Yeah, and I know Simu Liu in some of the interviews for the recent, I guess, promotion of the film, I saw a quote he has of a story he wants to adapt where, let me know if you saw this, Spider-Man loses his spider sense and he goes to train with Shang-Chi and create his own martial arts form called the Way of the Spider.
Ooh.
So, like, listen, I know just some people don't love Tom Holland teaming up with people constantly, but man, if we got to see a Spider-Man Shang-Chi team up where they're training together and they're going to fight, like, I think there's like a bunch of other characters that get spider powers, like, that would be a very fun movie, I think.
I do like that, the sound of that premise.
Yeah.
That sounds awesome.
Mm-hmm. A question I have for you.
Mm-hmm.
Towards the end of the movie, right? Like, after they go to the village that I'm forgetting the name of. Is it Talao? Talao, thank you. When they go there and it's the night before the battle and he's talking to Katie, did you think he was going to say that he killed her grandfather?
No.
Because I find it weird that at the beginning of the movie they make it a big point that they met when they were like in high school when he first came to the country, and they became friends instantly, and then we find out that Katie's grandfather passed away, and then later in the movie we learned that Shang-Chi was supposed to go to America and kill this person, and he said he didn't do it, but then he said he did do it, and then maybe he hung around. Like, I was getting similar Bucky with Yori vibes from the friendship that he had with Katie. Maybe at the onset of the relationship. I don't know. I thought it was a little strange that I felt like we were building to something like that.
Okay, I see your rationale, but I feel like that would have, for me at least, that would have like totally jumped out of the experience. Be like, whoa, they're really tying that back there. I just thought that was her reality. Like her grandfather just, happened to die.
Yeah.
So that's, for me, that's just what it was. I didn't really think about his presence or his character really all that much throughout the movie. I think that was, for me at least, it was just, that was, that was just something that happened to her family.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I think the main crux of it was like, so why did they become best friends? Like, that was my wonder. And when he sat down with her and he said that he actually killed the person, I was like, is that why they're friends? Did he just feel guilty and he wanted to leave that life behind and he wanted to just make it up to her? Like, I didn't know. So I'm with you. It would have been a little like, oh, whoa, okay. So yeah, I wasn't hoping for that to be a revelation, but it felt like we were maybe going that direction at one point.
Right.
But yeah. Is there anything else that stands out to you that we haven't hit on yet that I'm forgetting about?
Still got the end credits scene.
Right. Anything before they walk through the portal along?
Let's see. I don't know. I feel like we covered action, pretty much everything that I was thinking about. I talked about the negatives. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if there's too much else that I haven't said. What about you?
I loved, you said it at the top, but I'll reiterate, loved the creature design, the use of Chinese mythology. Like, the lions looked great. The dragon looked awesome. So very, very happy with everything from the beginning of the film to credits, for sure.
Yeah, totally.
So post-credit time. Kayla freaked out when that scene happened. I thought the magician who we saw was going to be Doctor Strange when they showed, I think, Wong like messing with the rings on the table first.
Mm-hmm.
Did you think it was going to be Steven?
Like when they were at the uh
The
oh
Sanctum?
in the actual sanctum. So I
Yeah.
knew Wong was there. Like I thought he was the one doing the rings, and then you hear a voice which ends up being Bruce Banner. I thought that was going to be Doctor Strange because that just would have made sense.
Hmm.
Um, but it was Bruce Banner and Captain Marvel, who I was like, huh, I did not expect these two characters to show up.
Yeah, and I thought it was very cool that we're continuing to just like build that connective tissue, and I'm glad Captain Marvel is showing up in more places. But a couple questions. Uh,
Yeah, biggest one, elephant in the room.
I'm not even gonna question it, man. I'm glad. I'm glad Professor Hulk is gone.
So, my friends who are less like MCU in tuned as I am,
Hmm.
immediately like that was their first question after the movie was like, why is Hulk not like Professor Hulk anymore? And my genuine answer is like, because they don't want to do the CG every time Mark Ruffalo shows up. Uh, but like MCU logic wise, I don't know. I saw some theories thinking that maybe Bruce lost some gamma because of the snap,
Okay.
and that might be the rationale. And I like that idea because potentially She-Hulk takes over that role.
Oh, sure. That's a good one.
So that's a cool theory. I like that one. Other than that, I'm not really sure. Aside from the practical rationale of, oh man, we don't really want to CG Hulk every time. They're probably past that point because CG is pretty good right now.
Yeah.
But like, I don't know if they want to put Mark Ruffalo in that. I don't know if they're doing like the ping pong ball suit every time he's showing up or whatever. But yeah, maybe that's maybe that's part of it.
My guess was for the logic behind it is that he can just do it on command now. That was my first thought. But then I thought about that for literally a second. And I think that's going to be the explanation they give. But when I put thought into it, it's like, well, that was the point of Avengers 1
Yeah,
is that he can do it when he wants cuz he's always angry. Like, I don't know what their explanation is going to be, but I frankly don't care. I'm just glad Professor Hulk is gone.
yeah. I mean, I liked Professor Hulk.
Same.
It seemed like Mark Ruffalo looked like noticeably different, like almost like retained some of the hulky aspects of Professor Hulk. Like
Sure.
didn't just look like normal Mark Ruffalo to me.
Yeah.
Um, so like maybe there's something going on there, but maybe at the end of the day, it is like I'm Bruce Banner, and when I turn into the Hulk, I still retain what makes me Bruce Banner. I just happen to be a green monster. Like maybe that's it from going forward.
Yeah, I could see that be the case. I've seen a lot of people also freaking out about how long Carol's hair is. I think that is, you are looking into it too much, my friends. I'm sorry.
Yeah, doesn't this take place like before Far From Home? Like kind of like almost after Endgame, like not immediately after, but like
Hmm.
in close proximity to that.
I think so, yeah. And people, I've seen people being like, "Oh, what's the timeline like?" Because that hair must have taken years to grow out. She's got space hair. She's got Goku hair. It grew again when she went out all out. That there you go. It's fine. Like,
Yeah, yeah, that too. I would love to know the timeline of Phase 4 because projects are coming out before or after they were supposed to come out and things like that. I think we have a decent sense of where
hmm,
things land, but I think this is still before Far From Home.
I think so, yeah. Because
I think Far From Home is like the furthest point in the timeline so far.
I think you're right. Like, maybe an episode of Loki is after that. I forget.
Yeah,
I don't remember. But yeah, everything we've gotten from Phase 4 so far, I'm pretty sure takes place across within a 6 month window.
right.
So, the specific thing that they're talking about in the scene, though, with the rings, I have a theory of why Wong has no idea what they are or what the tech is or how old they are. Like, I have a pretty solid theory that I think is probably going to be true.
Let's hear it.
I think it's Eternals tech
Mm-hmm.
because the rings have this like stone look to them. The Eternals trailer played before the film, and their ship does have that stone look to it. I've also seen a couple other people be like, "Oh, the way the rings glow is in line with some of the Eternals visuals." So like, I don't know. I think it would make sense that if you're setting up this new character and you see that the movie hits and you know it's going to do well and you have a chance to potentially tease the power of the Eternals since the film comes out in a couple months, to me that makes sense. Like, if this is just one invention that they have, imagine what their entire arsenal is, how powerful they are, how long they've been around. I don't know where we'll get the payoff for that or if Shang-Chi is going to meet the Eternals, but I do think that's the explanation behind the rings.
I did see people say something about potentially being like celestial involved, which would then kind of be also Eternals related. So I could see that. I'm not really familiar with that realm of Marvel like at all, so I can't even venture a guess as to what this could be related to. And it's funny because that was like a tease, but all the characters were like, no clue what this is. We'll touch on that later.
Good meeting, guys. See you Monday.
Yeah, that was pretty much it. So I thought that was funny. I really appreciated about that scene them continuing the like cosmic Avengers vibe where everyone's like on holo display, and they're like checking in and seeing what's going on, and it makes it seem like the Avengers are still intact in a sense. I guess we don't know like the state of them, but the members themselves are in communication, seemingly in constant communication. So that's cool.
Yeah, and I think that is a good call because I was talking again on the car ride home about how, well, Kayla specifically brought up the fact that Brie Larson, I think premiere night, tweeted like, "Oh, congratulations, welcome to the MCU," and then he replied like, "Oh, thanks, Cap," and she was like, "She definitely tweeted that because she's in the movie." I think it was a good idea to lean into what you're saying with that like hollow net sort of thing because she probably could have shot that from her house. Like if they just sent her the costume, like she could have just done that in her own home studio that tons of actors have. And I think if we continue this sort of thing across post credits of the MCU, like yeah, it'll just help when actors aren't readily available if they can just record a cameo with anything local, and just work that in. Like I think that was a good call because this MCU cast is growing fast and there's a lot of big name people that aren't always going to be available.
True. I remember seeing people freak out about this end credit scene, and I feel like it's definitely overhyped. Remember people were like, this is the most game-changing end credit scene in the MCU. And it was cool, but I was not like blown away by it by any means.
Yeah, I think it was really cool. I think it's one of the. Is it one of the? I think in terms of like being relevant to actually like teasing and progressing something, I think it's one of the better ones. But yeah, I'm with you. I don't think it was earth shattering.
No, it was good though. And the Wong sequence of them doing karaoke, is that in the end credit scene?
Yeah, it is.
Okay, then yeah, that's definitely it's
That's
great because
earth-shattering.
like they had two serious end credit scenes, but they did find the time to make a fun sequence of Wong doing karaoke with them, leading right into Hotel California. So that was good stuff.
Yeah, and I do love that, like we've been talking about, of him just being this relatable dude. That at the beginning of the movie they're doing karaoke, and at the end of the movie they're doing karaoke also. They just got some friends that can do some crazy stuff.
Yeah, that's the best part. Like even after all, like I said this earlier, even after everything that happens in the movie, they're still back in San Francisco, just being like regular people that you can just you'll see on the street. It doesn't seem like he got a new job. Well, obviously he's a part of the Avengers. He's probably not a valet anymore, but like I would not be surprised if like in the next movie he was like, yeah, I just put my 2 weeks in. I'm about to start being an Avenger full time.
And
But
then
yeah,
they're like, you don't get benefits. And he's like, what?
yeah, exactly.
Um, I am glad too that Katie is being brought along with him for at least some of the stuff they're doing. You know, like that she was invited to the meeting because I did like her in this. I think as far as the buddies go in MCU movies, we don't have a tons of them, but I do think that she did a really good job playing off of him, and even in some of the action stuff, I liked what she was doing. So her being included, I was a fan of that. You know.
Yeah, she was a good presence. I also like. There's kind of like an ambiguity of their friendship slash relationship. They were like holding
Mm-hmm.
hands at the end of the movie, um, and it's like even if they are in a relationship, like doesn't matter either way. It's
Mm-hmm.
more subtle than man has to kiss woman at the end of the movie because that's just how it works. So I'm glad that that wasn't like a point for this movie to do. Is that at the end of the movie they're closer than ever, and that could mean they're still really good friends or they're in a relationship or whatever, and like we don't really get the answer for that. And I like that. I don't like the heavy-handedness of romance being forced into every movie these days. So it's good that even if that is the case, we really didn't like see too much of that. So I like that.
Yeah, and I can see that absolutely. I definitely think that they're still just friends. And that was another one of the first things I said when I left the movie. I'm like, I'm really glad that they're just like two good friends and they're not trying to make it weird or trying to make it a forced romance. Like the fact that they're just really close friends and it's a platonic, very loving, close friendship on a big stage like this, I was like, again, refreshing. And I hope they keep it that way because it was very nice. But
Yeah, I agree.
overall, this was a damn pleasure to watch. I had a great time with this movie.
Yeah, totally. It's one of those I want to go back to see soon.
Yeah, this is one I will buy the Blu-ray of, and I have not done that in a couple of years for Marvel.
True, yeah. It's also one I'm like, man, I'm very excited for this to come to Disney Plus eventually, so I can just watch it whenever.
Yeah, I really want to watch it again, like now.
Yeah,
Do you have a ranking prepared?
I do. Let me pull it up.
Yeah, I'm pulling mine up.
So, yeah.
Go ahead.
So this was one I think I was telling you expecting around like the 11 to like 15, 16 mark for me, and it landed at number 9. So
Okay.
it's in a top 10 for me, which I was really not expecting. So I can run through my top 10. So Loki's number 10, then it's Shang-Chi, then it's Black Panther, Guardians of the Galaxy, Spider-Man Homecoming, WandaVision at number 5, Captain America Winter Soldier at number 4, Infinity War at number 3, Endgame at 2, and Civil War at 1. So definitely surprised that it was in the top 10, but I think it's very deserving of that.
Yeah, I love to see it in the top 10 because it is also in my top 10, and it is quite high. I can tell you that right now. I don't think I've given you my updated top 10 now that I've seen everything. I've done timeline order. So I can read through it right now if you'd like.
Let's hear it. I will say I did look at your ranking on Letterboxd,
Okay.
but I want to hear you say it. I want to hear you say it.
Number 10 is Loki. Number 9 is Captain America the First Avenger. 8 is Thor Ragnarok. 7 is Avengers Endgame, mainly because I am never in the mood to watch it and I need to be in the mood to watch that movie.
Okay.
6 is Far From Home. 5 is Avengers Infinity War. 4 is Guardians of the Galaxy. 3 is Captain America the Winter Soldier. 2 is Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings. And then number 1 is Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2.
Yeah. Damn. That's quite the shift in your rankings for like a lot of things.
Yeah, Winter Soldier I still love. Like the top 5 are fantastic, I think. Like some of my favorite comic book movies I've ever seen, being Infinity War, Guardians 1 and 2, Winter Soldier, and Shang-Chi. It's just, I think Shang-Chi doesn't rely on the Marvel formula in important ways. And to me, that just made it a new bar where I'm like, okay, Marvel can deviate like a good amount from their actual like formula, still keep the MCU-isms, but they can deviate. And moving forward, if things don't deviate, I might be a little harsher to them than I would otherwise because it can work, you know?
Right, we're at the point now where if you're coming out and making a Marvel movie that just feels like another Marvel movie, it's stale. And that was my issue with Black Widow. It just kind of felt like a stale, standard Marvel affair, which, you know, it wasn't a bad movie by any means, but it didn't offer anything that was new. And Shang-Chi certainly does in spades, in various ways throughout the movie, whether it's the action or introducing like mythology, this specific mythology to the MCU. There's just so much about this movie to love. So yeah, I think it's certainly warranted in the upper echelon of the MCU, which is awesome.
Yeah, and on repeat viewings, I think there's a chance it could go higher or lower. But for now,
Sure.
It is number 2. I think there's a world where it could be number 1, but I need to sit with it for a while, you know, just because we've been doing this thing for 12 years almost now, longer, and it still managed to do something so new and so awesome, you know, and I feel like we haven't gotten that, honestly, since Endgame, and even then, the reason that was so great was because it was just all that payoff and references over the last 10 years. So, very impressed with Shang-Chi.
Yeah, great movie.
Well, that, I believe, is our full thoughts on Shang-Chi. I'm sure we'll have more to talk about with other records it breaks throughout this week on the new episode of Excelsior this Saturday on YouTube and podcast services. But until then, Jack, where can the agents of Excelsior find you?
Yeah, if you want to follow me, you can follow me on Twitter, social media, at FascinatedJack. We are preparing to have our hearts broken probably this Saturday for the state of the Marvel's Avengers game, potentially. So we'll see about that. We have an updated roadmap that is being dropped tomorrow as of this recording on September 8th, and we will talk about that, like what Christian said, on Saturday when the episode releases for that. So stay tuned for that. Might be a black tie affair, Christian. We might be in mourning.
Yeah.
But what about you? Where can people find you?
You can follow me on Twitter, Twitch, TikTok at Chun2D2, as well as here, youtube.com/joyclicks for the video version of this podcast and the Excelsior playlist, alongside the playlists for all of our shows, like Jedi Knights, Gamescast, Hall of Game, Long Play Club, whatever else we got going on. You can find the playlists there. Excelsior is also available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, your service of choice. If you enjoyed the show, be sure to give it a rating or a review on your platform because it will help the show out a ton. And if you want to help us out even further, patreon.com/joyclicks has the $1 and $5 tiers. $5 gets you producer credit on this show and every show we do, like Aaron Easton and Charles Applin. So thank you very much. And Jack, that is an MCU review. Feels good.
Feels real
It's been a minute.
Yeah, it's been forever. So, and it's good because we're talking about the first MCU movie since Black Widow, obviously, but post-pandemic or during the pandemic, and it's just great to talk about that. Like, Far From Home was the last theatrical experience that I really enjoyed enough from the MCU. Black Widow was a different story, and now we're back with this where it feels good to be back watching MCU content in the theater. So good stuff all around.
Yeah, maybe it is just being elevated by having waited so long, right? But I do think that this movie, in the scope of the MCU, feels like a moment, and I feel like it's a tone setter for the Avengers side of Phase 4, not necessarily the multiverse stuff, but on the ground, movie to movie, what's up. I think this is kind of, we're gonna look back and we're gonna be like, oh, okay, yeah, Shang-Chi really set things off,
Totally, yeah.
So we will see, and we'll be back for a normal episode this Saturday, but until then, Excelsior.
Excelsior.